Hey, it's Mike here, and today I wanted to respond to a recent interesting video called Do All Vegans Think the Same by a YouTube channel called Jubilee, where vegans essentially vote with their feet, and they walk over to the section of the floor that matches their answer. For example, if they ask, do you like dogs, you walk over to the strongly agree strip because puppers are awesome. But as the questions go on, a very interesting dynamic develops between two vegans in particular. One is your sort of stereotypical blunt vegan that tends to trigger people, and the other is a more lenient, open vegan who people tend to like more. Now, by now, their video probably has over 1 million views, so a lot of people have seen this, even though it's pretty par for the course for Jubilee as a YouTube channel. But let's see what that first question is.
You can be vegan for reasons other than ethical.
Okay, so there's a pretty major split here, which is interesting because they also do an Instagram poll for each question, and 95% agreed. They thought that there were other reasons you could be vegan besides just ethical, which goes to show there's a little bit of a disparity there. But right off the bat, I would say there's a bit of a language trap here. It's how are you defining vegan? Are you defining it as somebody that practices the philosophy of veganism, or just somebody that eats a vegan diet?
I guess it's just like in the definition. Veganism is a way of living which seeks to exclude, as far as practicable and possible, all forms of animal exploitation.
Richard's right in terms of the classic definition of what a vegan is, of what veganism is, but colloquially, a lot of people just think that a vegan means does not eat or use animal products of any sort. And it makes sense because if somebody just eats a vegetarian diet, they are called a vegetarian. But if somebody just eats a vegan diet, a lot of vegans don't consider that vegan because they could be doing all sorts of other things that hurt animals.
I didn't become vegan with any sort of ethical reasoning in mind. I just was very sick all the time, and I just had an inclination that if I stopped eating animal byproducts that I would feel better, and I did. And all the ethical reasons came as a result.
So it's clear that she started off by simply going on a plant-based diet, a vegan diet, but she didn't become an ethical vegan. She didn't start practicing veganism until a little bit later. And this was the exact same pattern that I followed. I'm like, oh, vegan's healthier, and then I took the meat goggles off because I wasn't part of the system and was like, oh, I care about animals too. And I don't get really mad about people who just eat vegan diets calling themselves vegan. They're just still learning about it usually. And caring about animals is still a part of it. It just becomes a bigger part of it as time goes on, and then pretty soon they're doing more than a vegan diet. And so let's keep going.
Why I went vegan was for the environment. Climate change is real. You could do more good for the environment by being vegan than giving up your car, which is insane. I guess the ethics came afterwards, which is why I agree with you guys. I feel like we both think the same things, but why I started wasn't for ethics.
And I would go further and even say that that environmental aspect actually is ethical. People are trying to do what's right for the planet because of moral reasons. But in order to practice veganism as a lifestyle, you have to have that component of reducing harm to animals, because that's what it is. All right, next one.
I will not buy or cook non-vegan items for loved ones.
This is a great question. It's not talked about very much, and the distribution is very much like, heck no. And my angle on this is I just let people know that ethically, I don't buy animal products, so please don't try and ask me to buy animal products for you. In fact, once my friend was running late to dinner and actually called ahead, they're a meat eater, and asked me to order them a meat dish. And as a bit of a prank, I changed his order to tofu. However, the people at the restaurant knew us all so well that they actually changed his order back to meat. So little prank failed, and I would say no, that is absolutely not the same as somebody ordering meat for a vegan because it's within his ethics to eat tofu. Okay.
This one's tough because I've bought like a chicken burrito for my brother. He would go get it anyway, and that's maybe not the best way to go about it. Maybe I should deter him, but the way I try to promote my diet is just by being an example and not by forcing it into someone else, because I just think that if maybe I had bought a vegan burrito, he would just be resentful of veganism.
This is where Elizabeth starts to stick out, and for an extreme parallel, I don't think it's being a good example of somebody who doesn't support slavery by still going and picking up a slave at the auction for your brother on the way home. I was already at the market, no big deal. Not the case at all. And I would say it's kind of inconsiderate to ask somebody to be complicit in something that is against their ethics, against their morals. Vegans who have this problem probably just haven't communicated how uncomfortable they are ordering animal products for other people, but I could see this being a major problem in a romantic relationship where one person's vegan and they aren't, and I haven't been in that situation, so I can't speak to it.
Buying it or preparing animal products or anything that's not vegan for somebody is enabling them to fund the very oppression that I'm against. Like for me, I've taken the liberation pledge. So like I'll refuse to eat at a table where people are eating animal products. In my mind, it's the same thing as if like you're eating a dog or a child in front of me. You're not gonna wanna like stay at that table and be with that.
This is where it's worth mentioning that people in the comments cannot handle Richard. Quote, Richard is the classic version of vegans that are extremely annoying. Another one, how can Richard act so high and mighty when his eyebrows literally look like that? And finally, people like Richard are the reason why people hate vegans. I'm going to unpack hating vegans more in a bit, but first he also mentions that he took the Liberation Pledge, which is where you refuse to eat around people that are eating meat, among other things. Deserves a whole video, but here is the response of other people.
You're gonna wanna like try to change those people.
Okay, so if you're gonna try to change people, don't you think it'd be beneficial to sit with them because then you could expose them to your point of view?
So actually every single person that I've told the Liberation Pledge about, they've had no problem changing their meals and going to vegan restaurants with me. If you care about me as a person, how could you not change one meal?
I think some people can pull it off and others can't. For example, if you have a large family that eats meat, you're literally estranging yourself from your family. For others like Richard, who appears to have more accepting friends, they're gonna be better off.
All of my family knows you're not going to come to my house and bring any animals in or ask me to prepare it, but I do a lot of cooking. So I think what has brought me a lot of joy is like taking everything that I know my family loves to eat and veganizing it. And I've seen like my mom, my dad, and my brother, who I never thought would go vegan in a million years, go vegan. And I do know that if I would have had the approach of like judging them or, you know, coming too aggressive, it would not have been met with love or understanding.
I think Nikki's point is undeniable here. In her particular situation, if she had taken the Liberation Pledge, she could have actually prevented 2 of her family members from going vegan. Who knows though? I would also say people who have been vegan for longer and their social circle understands them, their family understands them, then it's probably less of a missed opportunity to do the Liberation Pledge. I don't really know. We don't have like studies on this. Anyway.
You're still vegan if you allow yourself an exception occasionally.
Okay, this is an interesting one. Before I show which way they walked, I will say right off the bat, I absolutely disagree that you can have a major exception unless we are talking, once again, semantically about what the exception is. For example, if you go to a restaurant and you order something and the waiter accidentally gives you cheese, you aren't like no longer vegan. That would be an exception I would consider, okay. But if we're talking about like, oh, once a week I eat a chicken strip, oh, hell nah. All right, let's see what they did.
Where do you draw the line then, I guess? Like you're bending your own morals every once in a while. It's the same thing with like meatless Mondays. Like we don't have like homophobic free Tuesdays. Like it's every day is.
He rubs people the wrong way. Even vegans in the comments are rubbed the wrong way, but he's right. He's absolutely right here.
Say you're traveling and it's genuinely hard to find like vegan food. You can't like survive on like just like lettuce all the time. And in certain like cultures, like say like China, like it's really hard to find something without meat.
It is becoming way easier to eat vegan even around the world. I mean, here's Happy Cow's map of Beijing showing vegan restaurants and vegan options. Yeah, it's not in rural areas, but we're coming a long way everywhere.
We have fruits and vegetables everywhere. And like, I don't want to just tell everyone to only like
There's food
basic
deserts
plants,
though, and
but
in food deserts, that's not necessarily always true.
I have to actually disagree with this food deserts point because a food desert is defined as not just a place that lacks fresh veggies, but also a place that lacks fresh animal products. Here's Wikipedia's literal picture representing a food desert. I mean, what's on the right? Beans. There's also going to be pasta there. You know, on the right, there are canned vegetables, which can make a decently rounded meal. And those cornflakes on the left are actually vegan, even though they have a few grams of sugar. And you can't tell what's on the left. That's actually dried beans and canned guava. This has been How to Eat Vegan in a Food Desert with Mike the Vegan.
3 months near the Arctic Circle in Iceland. And in Iceland, their diet is just, it's such a cold climate. It's all like sheep, fish, you know, it's really dairy. Because
but they don't
that's
have
what
any
the
fruits or
land,
vegetables out there whatsoever at all?
the climate doesn't allow for that unless you're building greenhouses, which, you know, is like how they're moving. But in remote villages where there's only 20 people, you know, you can forage flowers to make tea and like little berries here and there, but that doesn't sustain people.
So Elizabeth says that she was in a remote area of the Arctic Circle where it's pretty much all animal products. Firstly, this does not apply to 99.9% of people who do not live in the Arctic Circle. But if you put yourself in this situation, you have to decide, am I willing to put in the extra work to be packing these foods away, these dried beans, these legumes, maybe even some seeds for sprouting? You can sprout fresh greens anywhere on the planet. Or am I willing to just give up being vegan for a certain period of time? Now, I know people who have been vegan at sea in the Navy for 3 months at a time, so this is absolutely doable. If there's a will, there's a way, but at that point, when you're in a remote village of 20 people in the Arctic Circle, you've decided to do that, and whatever reason you have to be there should be more important than your motivations to be a vegan and not harm animals. And that's never gonna happen for most vegans, all right.
I've been bullied for being vegan.
So most of them said yes, they were bullied, and I would say that yes, most vegans are bullied at some point to some degree for being vegan. That doesn't mean that no vegans are ever guilty of bullying non-vegans for not being vegan, but still, I think that vegans are generally treated unfairly, disproportionately negatively. Those are my feelings.
Every now and then you get the, bro, you look like you need a hamburger, but I mean, it's not that bad.
Like, I got left out of like a lot of dinner plans and stuff like that with family and friends. They didn't want to pick somewhere that I could also eat at. They wanted to stay with what they wanted to eat.
I definitely feel her, and I have a very close vegan friend who was actually specifically disinvited to a birthday party, like actually targeted in advance and asked not to come because the girl whose birthday it was gonna have a lot of animal products and she just didn't want to feel judged on her birthday. I'll also say there's just a lot of people that are, you know, a little bit awkward and they're trying to just be funny and make jokes, and they end up bullying vegans kind of by accident, you know, making your standard anti-vegan jokes. And I will say, I play Apex Legends online and my handle is Mike the Vegan. And I'll join a game and right off the bat, they're like, I just love eating a juicy steak so much. I love killing animals, putting them in my mouth, and like they're just trying to make me angry. Now, these are totally unprompted, and oftentimes I'll interact with them more, and then they'll sort of take things back, say they were just joking. But still, I'm definitely not surprised that Elizabeth says she hasn't been bullied as a vegan. You know, she might be someone that doesn't always say they're vegan, even on purpose, going out of their way to not let people know. And now I feel like she's gonna be bullied for not being vegan enough. Good job, Mike. But I think the main mission she has here is she's strategizing to make veganism look less extreme and more approachable, which is sort of a valiant cause, but I think it's a little misguided.
I get people who try to take like my blackness away. They'll say, you're not black if you're vegan. How can you be black and vegan?
I think this is definitely pretty rough and goes to show that people will use any aspect of you against veganism because they're just that triggered by it.
Someone finds out you're vegan and it's like, the world hates you, and I think it's really easy to bully people online.
She said it's like the world hates you, and this is where I have to take a bit of a tangent, not even really a tangent at this point, to this Guardian article that came out recently, which is very fascinating. I think everybody should read it. It goes through the psychology of why people are often horrible to vegans, and it also talks about a study which claims that vegans are more discriminated against than religions and black people, different races, which I think is probably not actually true. For example, a black person will be instantly discriminated against by someone who's racist the moment they're seen. Can't tell if someone's vegan right away. We haven't had people lynched because they were vegans, and hopefully that doesn't happen. But it at least goes to show that vegans are discriminated against on paper. You know, the only group that was worse was drug addicts, apparently. You know, so vegans are an out group that is discriminated against. That's just a fact.
If you wear leather, you are not a vegan.
Again, we have the predictable spread. My perspective is that you can absolutely still be vegan and have old leather when you're sort of first going vegan. But if you keep buying leather products, literally animal skin, then that's not okay. It's also, if you're gonna do any activism, absolutely ridiculous to have it. I mean, George Monbiot got totally reamed on Piers Morgan for having that leather. Piers loved the fact that George was wearing leather.
But the way our society is structured, there's so many accidental cases in which you could be owning or wearing a vegan thing. Like, you ride a bike, a lot of bike seats are leather, and it's hard to always know exactly what you're purchasing.
To me, it's like just not fair to the animals for us to like abuse our own ignorance and not actually take the time to research.
Again, Richard is on point from his logical, philosophical perspective, but because he's being confrontational, people are going to sort of turn against him. Like if he was a really polite dude with a British accent saying all this super sincerely and almost apologetically, people would probably have a different reaction and not be triggered. Like basically if he was Earthling Ed. Excuse me, but I have a different opinion. I don't think it's fair to the animals to abuse our own ignorance and not take the time to do the research. I think we can all do better. That wasn't an Earthling Ed impression, but you know what I'm talking about.
I think people do have excuses, especially in like poorer neighborhoods. They're working so much, they don't have the time to consciously go out and research about veganism. I think that's more of an issue that comes when you have more income and more choice.
I think this guy's really smart. There's definitely a resource aspect. Like, not everyone's gonna be able to just get rid of their car because there's a leather steering wheel. However, I disagree a little bit because most leather clothing items can be replaced quite easily at thrift stores like Goodwill for a cheap price. You can get a non-leather jacket, you can get a cloth belt, and you can get non-leather shoes quite easily.
I think it's really important though that we have a very clear message of what veganism is, because when we start to make excuses, then people who aren't vegan and are just learning about it, they have a confused message of what it is.
He's definitely not wrong. If everybody's throwing out a different idea of veganism, that can be confusing. However, I think it's equally as important to have a sort of ecosystem of different ways for advocating for veganism. For example, not just copy and pasting directly from the vegan master.
You are a better person if you were vegan.
So I wouldn't say I'm a better person than other people in general, but me as an individual, I am a better person than I ever was before, and I guarantee that anyone who goes vegan will be a better version of themselves.
I'm sorry, Richard is on point here. I made a video about this exact thing years ago, how if you were to take yourself, clone yourself, have one version be vegan, the other is not, you are just simply a better person. And people don't want to accept this, but when you're talking about issues that they agree with, it's fine. For example, if you were to take yourself, clone yourself, one of them eats dogs and kills dogs for just their own pleasure, they're obviously a worse person than the same person who doesn't do that. But if it involves their habits, it's absolutely not okay. And I think we just live in a culture where it's considered very bad to even just ethically compare two people. I don't know how that happened, but it's definitely the case. Finally though, there are definitely vegans who are horrible people. I mean, we have Nazi vegans, they're definitely worse people than your average meat eater. So, and one woman says that.
I think I'm a better person because I'm vegan, but I know vegans who are racist and homophobic, and to me, they aren't good people.
Just in my personal opinion, I feel like vegan is an anti-discrimination, anti-oppression movement. It's really hard to be racist and be vegan. I would not consider you vegan if you're homophobic or racist or something like that, because we are animals. How can you be discriminating against humans in that form?
I definitely ascribe to this philosophy. I think humans are animals, and therefore, if you don't harm animals, you shouldn't harm them too. It gets a little complicated where human animals are being horrible to non-human animals. How do you treat them then? All right, that's it. I think everybody who's involved in this is awesome. Don't get me wrong, it's easy to just sit back and judge like the little minute details of people's answers, but I think they all did a great job. You know, I do fundamentally disagree with Elizabeth on a lot of things, but let's please be nice to her. And I will say it's better to focus on what all the vegans have in common than all the little minute differences in opinion, because that's the best way to get stuff done. All right, feel free to like, subscribe, let me know what you thought about all these answers, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.